was a moment in the late summer of February 2018 that I will visit forever. I was at home, not my adult home of now, or the various makeshift homes of my 20s, but my childhood home. Capital H, home, nestled in a bushy cul-de-sac on a hill, peering out from the treetops with a creek at the bottom of the street below. This is a place that I carry within my fast-beating heart because it no longer exists in the same way that it once did. It was here in my mother's room with the afternoon sun lingering beyond the window, the day familiar and comfortable as days in childhood homes, despite everything, often are, that I knelt by her bedside. She, only days away from dying, looked at me with such tenderness and resolve and ran her hand across over my forehead and through my hair, firm and gentle, at the same time as if to say, I will always be your mother and you will always be my child. I had been mid-sentence at the time, but lost for words, her death lingering always. It was arresting, and yet she was able to calm me and know how much I needed to be reminded that I was and would be always somebody's child. There is no one else who can affect me like that. No one else could stroke my head in that way, and I knew at that moment it would be the last time I would really feel like I was a child. When you're around my age and a decade or so younger, and you face these questions that your own parents would have faced, do I want children of my own? How do I feel about family? Can I overcome my own family hang-ups or traumas and those I've undoubtedly, unknowingly inherited to start anew? You start to appreciate in a deeper way what your parents did for you to be here today. Some people are able to express that to their parents while they are still living. Some are not. For some, it happens earlier, others later, but it happens to most of us. We have to face that, and whatever it means. And with that comes grief of all kinds. The grief of not being where you thought you would be when the question starts tugging at you, until it rises in your throat and you need to answer it out loud for whomever may be witness to it. The grief of life before you started your journey into parenthood, whatever road you ended up on. The grief of it not working out the way you wanted. The grief for your own childhood, family, parents you have who are aging slowly, or parents you wished you'd had. Parents that have since passed on, parents that you never really knew or connected with. There are so many emotions and quiet questions that weigh upon you in your childbearing years. It's crazy that everyone will experience this to some extent, whether they choose to acknowledge and examine it or endure it quietly. When I think of that moment with my mom, it shortens my breath and stops me in my tracks, which is most days, because I miss her. I miss my mother. I miss her so much. What brought us together when we were really humming in unison like busy little bees were the things that I love doing, things that make me happy. And not like an ambition or achievement met kind of happy, but a spontaneous laughter kind of happy. One that is not intellectual, but visceral, and embodied happiness. Is that the feeling of innate motherly love? Is that what we all chase for the rest of our lives? Because she taught me how to enjoy life through its simple pleasures and through finding what you love and simply doing more of that. When you're a single parent with 3 children away from your home country and family support, you figure out how to make a lot out of a little, and you become resilient. And so in many ways, she's present within me when I continue to look after myself and do those things. I know when I'm looking after myself because I feel that she is nearer to me. But she wasn't there, or at least I didn't know how to tune into her in the years after her death. I didn't know where to find her, and I kept searching, and I became very lost. I searched and searched, and when my partner's father died a few years later, in the middle of our trying years, I didn't stop my search. We fell pregnant in early grief for our parents, and I endured in the way that I had endured her death, through my musical activity, learning to surf, hiking, and through working. I approached these things like I always used to because keeping busy used to help me out of the stagnation of hardship. And when lockdown entered its 2nd year and I said goodbye to plans to live overseas and tour my music, I pivoted into further studies. I altered my dream and set upon becoming a music therapist. I continued to work and plug away at recordings and shows, and I kept busy throughout my pregnancy, all the while searching still for my mother to tell me what to do. When my first son was born, I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. The first genuine happy feeling I'd had in years, since Mum died probably. Since she stroked my hair. that embodied happiness at last. Our lives could progress somewhere else, out of this grief haze. We had our baby at last. Our family was growing anew. But tragically, it was devastatingly short-lived. I knew what death looked like because I'd held my mum as she died. I hadn't planned to do that. But when you care for a loved one in the home, you're always around, watching closely on high alert, in fight or flight mode, ready to burst into action or whatever may be necessary. So when I heard her voice in the middle of the night, I ran to her. She was in pain, the kind of pain that morphine couldn't solve. She was dying. I offered the comforts that had worked in those last days, some flavored ice to suck on, and I held her. Her body did the things that dying bodies do, which is both violent and completely natural, and we looked at each other, my sister behind her, watching me to understand what was happening. And then she was gone. So in the days after Percy arrived, I felt it, but I didn't know. I felt him stop breathing, and it was like when my mum died. I was holding him. My firstborn son slipped away in my arms, and so did my mother, or at least that is how it seemed to me. And this is my trauma. The trauma to erupt all other traumas wide out into the open. And I'm still in shock about it. I mean, how could I not be? After all our losses, our precious firstborn baby, here earthside, only briefly to die amongst us. It was unbelievable that in that instant, you could be hurled from the sheer joy to earth-shattering pain and enough sorrow for several lifetimes. So you see, being a mother has been filled with pain, absence and yearning, what ifs, shame and self-blame, devastation, anger, regret, disbelief, and death. Worst case scenario after worst case scenario, like the trees that fell and crushed people's houses the night Percy was born. Just like that, my happiness was taken away, and I was set upon a whole new ocean of grief. And this time, I stopped. I stopped dead in my tracks. Parts of me had died, and perhaps will always remain that way. I was catatonic and disassociated. My baby boy had died, and I had no mother to stroke my hair and tell me that I would survive this. Eventually, the lockdown ended. Our son Percy remained dead, as did my mother, but we continued to live. We stopped working and we went hiking. We climbed mountains and scrambled over rocks and felt our mortality, our flesh against rock. We were blown over by rainstorms on days you couldn't and shouldn't climb mountains, and we cried in bad weather, alone on those hillsides. Our community rallied around us in those initial months, and then eventually eased off as we figured out how to do life again. Because the thing about cumulative losses is that people run out of I'm sorries. They have their own grief too, and grief is forever. So your friendship circles suddenly shrink to those who know how to be around you, how to let you be your new self, riding the ebb and flow and the pain and sorrow, whilst continuing on however you can. Somehow, we ended up falling pregnant again. Pregnancy after loss can be a harrowing time, a capital A for anxiety, and yet I was one of the lucky ones who, after losing a newborn baby, had some hope to be a parent to another baby in the not too distant future. But in those days, those weeks, I didn't believe that it would happen. I couldn't let myself believe that it could actually work out. It's hard to explain. But once you've experienced worst-case scenarios, you come to expect worst-case scenarios with each chance you take. It's not that you're pessimistic, but more so pragmatic and realistic. You know that life is never really in our control in an acute way that others can remain naive about for most of their lives. I gave birth to my son Ziggy exactly 1 month and 1 year after Percy was born. We call Ziggy our rainbow baby, and his middle name is Rainbow. Despite what people may think, they are a rainbow baby because they come after a loss, which some people view as a storm. It's a flawed analogy, but we bereaved parents cling to what meaning and community we can. No one else quite understands the experience of losing a child unless they have had that experience. So I use the term rainbow baby to tell others I am like you. In this small and catastrophic way, I too have lost a child and remain standing. These days, a year and a half out from our Percy dying, 5 years after my mum passed, and 2 beloved cats, a dear friend too, I'm still continuing on because we don't choose to survive such heartache, but we continue to live. And for those loved ones whom we have lost, we have to live as well as we can to honor them and make their lives mean something. So I have my second son, Ziggy, and I'd love to say with each day the pain is lessened, but that would be a lie because I feel the loss of my mum and my son more than ever in my own experience of parenting, of motherhood. I look for her everywhere, but the difference is now, I know where to find her. And it sounds corny, but it's within me, my memories of her, and her voice that I can conjure easily in my head. That's the only truth to her being here. With Percy, I had such a fleeting time, and I can only find him most easily whilst holding his sibling in the middle of the night. It's a messy pool of emotions, grappling with having lost your child and also your parent in such close proximity, mothering without mother, mothering without child, and to be back on the path to parenting so soon, discovering who I am as a mother of a living child, as if years can just fall off your lifespan because you are in so much invisible pain that ages you millennia. You really see what matters in moments of deep grief, and there is so much that doesn't really matter. To be away from it all and tend to the things that remain afloat, those things that rise up and remind you of what is important to you and those whom you love. So no, the pain does not lessen with time. But if you can look after yourself, you can learn to make friends with the pain of tragedy, trauma, and loss. Not best friends, but enough that you acknowledge each other, greet each other with familiarity, and know what you need in the moment that you're faced with one another. You live with the pain every day, and you learn to love and laugh alongside it. For my mother and for my son, I continue to do that.